Number 8. The punching bag of the woodland. Marquise the cat.
See all this? This plant. These beautiful trees. The birds. My sweat falling down my face. This could all be yours. If you're a Marquise the cat main. You see, the first thing the Marquise the cat faction board says is you have conquered the woodlands. Now it's time to build a kingdom worthy of your name. See, if you choose to play Marquise, you've technically already won the game. You conquered the woodland turn 1. However, it is now your job to keep it that way. Good luck with that. Good luck with that. With your 3 actions? Come on, buddy. Come on. Come on. Really? Like, come on.
Marquise starts the game with a serious land advantage, and you should enjoy it while it lasts. While other factions get the ability to always take the higher die roll, or kill your entire faction, or just generally score a metric fuckton of points, Marquise gets to build. That's right, it's time to make like Bob the Builder and become the American military-industrial complex, baby. Caw-caw! Caw-caw! When I first played Marquise, I was a bit let down because I thought there was probably only one main strategy with them. I thought surely their first turn or two should be a pretty standard mapped out game plan. And while that first turn or two seems to be pretty optimized, every other decision in the game with this faction I find to be pretty intriguing. Since you only get 3 actions per turn, every choice you make feels so weighty. Did I choose the right building? I need to get this sympathy out of my clearing, but can I afford the action to battle it? Oh my god, is that a bomb or a snare? Either way, I insta-lose the game and I need to do something about it, but I really can't afford to do it. Vagabond, please, I'm fucking begging you, get out.
The line between success and absolute catastrophic disaster, the worst game you've ever played, just no shot at winning, rides on a knife's edge when playing Marquise the cat, which already makes them more engaging than Woodland and Vagabond to me.
Cat's shtick is that they get points for building, which is weirdly unique amongst the root factions. No other faction in the game just gets points for dropping buildings on the board. Eerie almost resembles this, but I'd argue it's different because they score points at the end of their turn depending on how many roosts are out on the board. They aren't scoring points for building them necessarily. Regardless, this means you'll be spamming cardboard the entire game, which makes you a prime target to get absolutely curb stomped for those sweet, sweet cardboard points. Due to this, I've determined that Cats players need 2 things in order to succeed. The first, you gotta have Riz, brother.
Treat me like white tees, don't get me dirty. Love on me.
If you are a Rizless Cats player, you might actually be screwed. Half of winning on this faction is convincing the other players that your faction sucks so badly that there's actually no shot you can win. And secondly, you have to be a gambling addict. When I play Cats, I am constantly limit testing.
You, please, one time! And we fucked.
I'm trying to score as many points as I can before I'm board wiped. Surely building that 5th sawmill won't have any repercussions later.
Dr. Octagonopus!
No one will suspect anything if I just put a second workshop in Bunny, right? Surely?
Okay, let's kill him. Let's kill this guy.
I'll get to the sobering feeling that falls over you once all of your buildings have just been burnt to a crisp in a second. But before I do that, I want to dive deeper into the buildings that you're actually gambling on. The building tracks are an impressively elegant design. Each track has subtle differences that balance each other out quite well.
The sawmills score big if you're able to get 5 or 6 out, but you sacrifice all of your crafting and troop generation to do so. Going heavy on sawmills is very risky, but can pay off with some swingy turns if your opponents underestimate your scoring. The recruiters don't score as much as the other two buildings, but provide you with troops and card draw, which works nicely in tandem with field hospitals. The workshops slow down your engine completely, and you're usually not looking to craft too much on this faction, but in return for building just one of these, you're rewarded with 2 points, which is super efficient for just 1 wood. Each game, you'll have to carefully determine how many of each building you'll need in order to navigate the game. Where you place your buildings is also crucial. Stack too many buildings up in one clearing, an arbiter will eliminate you from the game, turn 2. There's so many little intricacies to such a straightforward mechanic, which I think is pretty cool. The last big thing about Marquise buildings that I really enjoy is something that only one other faction really has, which is a unique ruling structure. Since buildings count for rule, Marquise is able to create some really pesky boards for other players, making it extremely difficult for them to move. I find this to be a pretty understated part of the faction that is actually pretty core to their identity. They are a board presence faction, and it literally states it on their faction board, but I think players forget about it pretty often.
Another interesting decision Marquise players have to make is when they'll use their bird cards for extra actions. I'll be referring to this mechanic as Hawks for Hire because that's what they call it online, and I think that's really cute. In the physical game, I don't think there's any name for this mechanic, and that's a shame because Hawks for Hire is a great name, you know? We're hiring hawks, you know, to build and kill and move and recruit, you know, all the good stuff.
Cats 1000% needed this extra gas to have any chance of winning a game of Root against Russia. Each bird card giving you an extra action opens the door for a lot of optimization. Does the Marquise player hoard a bunch of bird cards for one big turn? Or do they spread out their usage throughout the game? Hawks for Hire also gives cats some flexibility. Maybe you sit on a bird card until you're really in trouble and need that 4th action. It also encourages you to interact with other players. You can buy bird cards from otters or spam swap meet to hope that you pull a bird card. All in all, this little mechanic gives Marquise the boost they need to keep up in the forest.
Another underrated part of Marquise is just how good they are at doing dominance. It's actually so underrated that I forgot to script it. I remembered standing right here how good it is. So I have to add that to my script, hold on.
Since cats get so many pieces on the board turn 1, and their general strength in the early game allows them to rush to 10 points rather quickly, they are one of, if not the best faction in the game in pulling off dominance victories. It's really cool that the design of cats reflects their lore. It's so fitting that the faction that currently rules the woodland would be good at pulling off dominance. It's yet another example of Cole's masterful storytelling through gameplay mechanics.
Now lastly on positives, Field Hospital rocks. Alright, I actually love field hospitals. I think they're great. For 2 main reasons.
The first is the bullshit you can do when another player tries to keep rush you.
What? Bring him back! Bring him back! Bring him back!
You can continuously bring your cats back to life, stopping the attacker from destroying your buildings and keep. The second being, it saves you the action of having to re-recruit cats that are lost in battle. Since you won't be crafting too much on this faction anyway, you can pretty comfortably throw away a lot of cards that other factions wouldn't. Knowing when to save your cats and when to let them die is an interesting decision all in itself, and makes riding that line between success and failure on the cats even juicier. Putting this all together feels really good. If you are able to pull off a win on cats, you actually feel like Oppenheimer. It reminds me of playing Mario in Smash Bros. Your options are so basic compared to the other characters in the game, but you can still maneuver yourself in such a way to abuse them through matchup and game knowledge. That's the same itch that Marquise scratches for me. There's so many cool little moves you can pull off with Marquise that are rewarding to discover. Marquise are a faction that forces you to get creative, which is pretty ironic considering how straightforward they are.
Now for the inevitable downfall of Marquise the Cat. Getting all your shit ran over.
Since all of your buildings are cardboard and there's not really any punishment for killing you, during the second half of the game when other factions are online and they can just start bulldozing clearings over, you're usually the first player they'll turn to. If players are really evil, they'll cut you down way earlier than that. To make matters even worse, wood is a token that can be destroyed, and near the end of the game, it's gonna get harder and harder to build. So you might have a few leftover wood each turn. This makes your clearings even juicier for your opponents, and especially for our furry friend the Vagabond. It's a shame because you can't even really blame everyone for killing you. It becomes so apparent near the end game that taking your cardboard is probably the best move that it becomes almost impossible to convince player B that player C is who they should actually attack and not you.
That's why I say you have to have some riz while playing Marquise the Cat. A lot of the time, the optimal move for other players will be to cut you down, and you have to convince them that it's not. While I love that I have to table talk on this faction, I dislike that most of it is begging people not to shoot me in the head.
You're also put in a tough spot because it's not like you can ever really slow down your point scoring for some sort of social strategic advantage. Your action economy never gets any better, so you need to take the points whenever and wherever you can. This leads to a bunch of games where you hit 18 points rather quickly, but then you have to convince the board that you're not actually winning. It's a shitty position to be in, because at that point, you're really just at the mercy of the table. It feels like if you are not winning basically the whole game as cats, you're not winning. But as soon as you start winning just a little too much, it's over for you. Even more painfully, cats have no type of comeback mechanic, nor any insurance that will maintain their scoring after their clearings have been gutted. Moles might lose one of their lords, but as long as they have Banker or another lord hanging in reserve, they can still score big. After lizards are killed, they have their acolyte actions to help get them back onto the board. Rats lose their recruit on their warlord when it's taken out, but at least they get to replace their warlord. Cats don't get anything like this other than field hospitals, but that's the one passive ability in the game that can be removed by destroying their keep. Even then, it's not like warriors really help you score. So once the cats are down, they are completely out. The downside of being in a uphill battle is rolling that boulder up that hill is going to get tiring eventually. Having a vagabond run into your clearing and wipe it out for 10 points to win the game feels awful. Moles teleporting in and doing 4 battles and then still having actions left over makes you feel like your faction was designed for a different game. Lord of Hundreds literally just does a recreation of the opening scene from Up. Like, they just bulldoze your entire town over, bro. The Marquise player has been working both sides of their brain at 200% to keep up with the other factions in the game, and they just get to hop in there and ruin the cat's hard work.
This all feels pretty terrible, and quite frankly, a bit out of your control. As much as you can prepare for the inevitable apocalypse of an endgame you're about to suffer through, you can't really check other players during the game. You're not the main faction that's going to be slowing other people down. You just don't have the actions for it. So if another faction has scaled to the point where they're just bulldozing you over, it doesn't even really feel like your fault.
Originally, I actually had Marquise a spot or two higher, but I ended up getting absolutely stomped so many times that it made me move them lower. More and more do I feel that certain matchups with Marquise feel unwinnable. I'm not saying that they are unwinnable, but just that they feel really bad. As I've played with better and better players, the Marquise struggle becomes more and more apparent. I run out of building spaces earlier, I get cut down earlier, and overall, I just end up riding the struggle bus for longer. It'd be one thing if after I died on this faction, I could nuke a clearing, but in Marquise's case, if you are board wiped, you actually just don't get to play the game anymore. And I mean that literally. Like, there's no fail case for if you are removed from the game, you just don't get to play the game anymore. So that's cool.
Overall, I would consider myself a Marquise sympathizer. They're a faction that I think has a lot more cool stuff going on than people give them credit for. However, their lackluster action economy and obsession with wood often leaves them as a point farm for many of the other factions in the game, causing them to be more of a win condition than a faction vying for the W. Which is a shame because, like, you had already conquered the woodland, like, you had all of it, bro. Like, what happened? With that disappointment out of the way, let's get on to number 7.